My life seemed to unfurl in ways I had never imagined as I sat in the sterile, softly lit hospital room, still grappling with the sheer physical and emotional toll of childbirth. The baby, our daughter, lay swaddled in a small hospital bassinet, her gentle breathing a soft whisper in the quiet room. Henry, my husband, paced restlessly by the window, his face a contortion of emotions I couldn't quite read. The scene was tranquil, a stark contrast to the storm brewing within me. It was then that a young woman entered the room, someone I had never seen before. Her presence was like a cold gust of wind, sudden and unsettling. Henry, upon seeing her, stopped pacing. His expression shifted from confusion to a forced neutrality, as if what was about to unfold was something inevitable, something he had resigned himself to long before this moment. "I want to marry Mia, so I'm leaving you," he blurted out, his words slicing through the air with a clinical coldness. I stared at him, my mind a tumult of disbelief and shock. Mia? Who was Mia? And why now, just after I had given birth to our child? His explanation was a litany of grievances. According to him, our marriage had become a hierarchy where I played the tyrant. He claimed I did nothing but order him around, that my attitude was intolerable. But it was Mia who had been his solace, the person who had listened and provided comfort when he felt most low. I wanted to laugh, or scream, at the absurdity of his words. The reality was far different. I felt it was I who had always been pushed into the role of the organizer, the doer. He hardly lifted a finger unless prompted. As he spoke, my body ached to stand, to confront him with my truth, but postpartum fatigue chained me down, making even speaking a laborious effort. I could only listen, my heart fracturing with each word. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. It opened to reveal Olivia, a figure both of us knew, but under circumstances neither of us could have predicted here. As Olivia stepped in, the color drained from Henry's face. The room tensed with anticipation. Then, Olivia spoke, her voice cutting through the thick atmosphere. "Excuse me," she began, "my name is Melanie Johnson. I'm 29 years old and currently pregnant with my first child." Her eyes locked onto mine with an intensity that felt both invasive and necessary. This revelation shattered whatever semblance of normalcy was left in the room. The air felt charged, heavy with the weight of unspoken stories and unacknowledged truths. Henry and I had met as fresh graduates at the same company, thrown together by corporate tradition that paired new employees with second-year mentors. Henry had been my mentor, patient and ever helpful, easing my transition into the complex corporate world. His kindness had made my first year bearable, and even enjoyable. As time passed, I graduated from mentee to mentor, taking on the responsibility of guiding a newcomer with Henry's advice still ringing in my ears. Even after our formal partnership ended, we continued to collaborate closely, a testament to the genuine bond we had formed. He was always the helper, the go-to person for anyone in need. It wasn't just to me, his generosity was extended to all. But now, as I looked at him, I saw a man divided, torn between the facade of the helpful colleague and the reality of a man overwhelmed by his inability to say no, not just at work, but at home and in his personal life. His admission of seeking solace in someone else, in Mia, wasn't just about our failed dynamics, it was a cry for help, a man drowning in his own life choices. As Olivia continued to unveil her connection to us, to this tangled web we had woven unknowingly, I realized that our story was far from over. There were truths yet to be uncovered, motives to be understood, and a future to be navigated, not just for Henry and me, but for our daughter, whose innocent slumber was oblivious to the complexities enveloping her very existence. As I navigated through the early stages of my pregnancy, I was anchored to our home, a prisoner to the relentless waves of nausea and dizziness that struck without warning. The bright and energetic mornings that once started with me bustling around the kitchen, preparing breakfast for Henry and myself, were now a distant memory. Instead, I spent most days curled up on the sofa, a blanket draped over me, my world reduced to the confines of our living room. The smell of food, once a comfort, now triggered bouts of sickness, forcing us to rely increasingly on takeout and prepackaged meals. "Sorry, it's just ready-made food again today," I would mutter apologetically, as Henry returned home from work. "It's okay, the food is good," he would reply, his tone neutral, devoid of any complaint. This had become our new normal, dinner conversations that were nothing more than brief exchanges about the practicalities of life, with no space for the emotions swirling beneath the surface. Despite his gentle demeanor and his assurances that the food was fine, there was an undeniable distance growing between us. It felt as though Henry, while physically present, was emotionally retreating from the realities of our shared life. He would ask if I was okay, his voice tinged with concern, yet his actions, or lack thereof, spoke louder than his words. The household chores, once a shared responsibility, now loomed over me as yet another burden I couldn't handle alone. One day, overcome by a particularly severe bout of sickness, I found myself calling out to him from where I lay. "Henry, I'm feeling really sick. Could you hang the laundry that's in the washer?" "Sure, got it," he responded, his voice carrying a hint of readiness to help. But as I listened to the distant thuds and clinks from the laundry room, a realization dawned on me. Henry's kindness, while a fundamental part of who he was, often shielded him from fully engaging with the personal struggles of those closest to him. He was always ready to lend a hand, to take on tasks, but it seemed he did so more out of a sense of duty than a shared emotional investment. As the days turned into weeks, and the physical toll of my pregnancy deepened, I watched Henry juggle his innate desire to help with his inability to fully immerse himself in the emotional aspects of our partnership. It wasn't just about doing chores or handling the practicalities of daily life, it was about understanding and sharing the weight of this transformative period in our lives. The gap in our emotional connection became more pronounced as my due date approached. Each day was a reminder of how much had changed and how much more was about to shift. As much as I valued Henry's kindness and his unwavering support in practical matters, I longed for him to see beyond the tasks and the to-do lists, to truly comprehend the depth of the journey we were on together, not just as parents-to-be, but as partners navigating the complexities of life side by side. "No, I didn't get the light bulb. You didn't ask for it." These words echoed in my mind as I sat on the sofa, my body heavy with fatigue. Henry's literal approach to household tasks had become a repetitive pattern, one that increasingly left me feeling drained rather than supported. True, he was always willing to help, there was no doubt about his good intentions or his readiness to assist whenever I made a request. Yet, the constant need to direct him, to spell out each task, was becoming a silent strain on me, especially now, amid the physical and emotional demands of pregnancy. I remembered the early days of our marriage, filled with mutual enthusiasm for our shared life. Back then, the division of labor seemed like a small thing to adjust to, a quirk of Henry's personality that I found endearing in some ways. He was incredibly efficient, after all, executing any task with precision once prompted. But as our lives grew together, this trait, once a minor irritation, loomed larger. It struck me then, as I reflected on our relationship dynamics, how our professional roles had subtly bled into our personal lives. When I was Henry's junior at work, I relied on him for guidance and support. He was my mentor, always there with the right advice when I reached out. However, he rarely initiated discussions or offered help without being asked first. This pattern had seamlessly transitioned into our home life. The realization was bittersweet. Here was Henry, a man who could always be counted on, yet his reliability came with a caveat: he needed to be asked, every time. It wasn't just about the light bulbs, the groceries, or the dishes. It was about the need for anticipation, the unspoken gestures of care that are the lifeblood of a shared existence, particularly in times of vulnerability. One afternoon, as I watched him sorting the groceries he had just bought, items I had listed for him, I decided it was time to address this gap between us. "Henry," I began, my voice calm but firm, "I appreciate how you always help out when I ask. But sometimes, I wish you could take the initiative to do things without me having to ask every time." Henry looked up, surprise etched on his face. "I just want to make sure I'm doing what you need," he replied, his voice tinged with a hint of defensiveness. "I know, and I love you for that," I said, reaching out to touch his hand. "But being a partner isn't just about responding to requests. It's about sharing the load, noticing things on your own." It's about taking care of each other without having to be asked. There was a pause, a moment of reflection. I could see Henry processing my words, and I hoped he understood not just the surface meaning but the deeper call for connection I was making. "I'll try," he finally said, his voice quiet but sincere. "I'll try to be better at that." His response was a small step, but it was a start. As we navigated the remaining months of my pregnancy, I held on to the hope that our partnership could grow into one where care was intuitive, where support was given freely and not just on request. Olivia's face turned serious as I began to share the recent strains in my relationship with Henry. It felt somewhat relieving to talk to someone who knew us both professionally and who might understand the subtleties of our dynamic. "Well, I'm feeling better physically, but things with Henry, they've been challenging," I admitted, hesitating a bit as the words left my mouth. Olivia listened intently, her expression a mixture of concern and attentiveness. "You know, Henry has always been the type to respond rather than initiate. Lately, that aspect of him has started to impact us more significantly," I continued, the frustration evident in my voice. "It's like he can't take any action unless specifically directed, and it's wearing me down, especially now, with the pregnancy." Olivia nodded, her eyes narrowing slightly in thought. "I remember you mentioning that before. It must be tough having to spell out everything, especially when you're supposed to be partners taking care of each other." "Yes, exactly," I sighed, feeling a mix of relief and sadness that someone else could see my predicament. "And it's not just the household chores or the groceries. It's his overall engagement. Even when I express how tough things are, he just doesn't seem to take it on as part of his own responsibilities. He sympathizes as if my struggles are mine alone, not ours." Olivia's face showed a flash of determination. "Have you tried talking to him about this? I mean, really laying it out clearly how much this is affecting you?" I nodded slowly. "I have, a few times. But it doesn't seem to sink in. He listens, he nods, but then nothing changes. It's like we're stuck in this loop where I'm increasingly becoming the nagging wife, and he's the oblivious husband, and it's exhausting, Olivia." She leaned forward, her tone soft yet firm. "Meline, it sounds like you need to have a deeper conversation with him. Maybe involve a counselor or someone who can help facilitate. It's important, especially with the baby coming. You both need to be on the same page, and it sounds like Henry might need some help understanding how to do that." I pondered Olivia's words. The idea of counseling had crossed my mind before, but I had hesitated, worried about how Henry would perceive the suggestion. Yet, hearing it from Olivia, seeing her concern and knowing her understanding of our backgrounds, it felt like a viable step, perhaps the only step left to bridge the growing gap between us. "Yeah, you might be right," I finally said, feeling a tentative hope. "It's worth a try. We can't continue like this, and maybe having a neutral third party might help him see things differently, help us find a way to connect again." Olivia smiled, a supportive, reassuring smile. "I think it's a great idea, Meline. Remember, it's not just about getting through this, but building a foundation that will hold you both, especially when the baby arrives." Her words, warm and encouraging, stayed with me as we wrapped up our conversation. It was clear what I needed to do next. As daunting as it was, the thought of seeking counseling offered a glimmer of hope for Henry and me, a chance to mend the frays in our relationship and to strengthen our bond before our family grew. I felt a resolve building within me, fueled by the support of an old friend and the desire for a better future for all three of us. "We take a walk, or do you need help with anything?" His silence on these matters was deafening, a stark contrast to the diligent partner he had been at work when we first met. As the days passed, the gap between us seemed to widen with each quiet dinner. Each night, he returned late. The house felt colder, the silences longer. I pondered Olivia's words, her suggestion that something more might be at play with Henry's late nights. Was it an affair? The thought churned in my stomach, a mix of fear and anger bubbling up. I didn't want to believe it, but the seeds of doubt were already sown. One evening, as I sat alone on the couch, a plan began to form in my mind. If Henry was indeed hiding something, I needed to find out. Not just for my peace of mind, but for the sake of our future child. I decided I would start by checking his phone when he was asleep or in the shower, looking for any signs of unusual calls or messages. The next morning, as Henry showered, I quietly picked up his phone from the bedside table. My hands trembled as I typed in the passcode, half hoping I wouldn't find anything, yet driven by a need to know. The phone unlocked, and I quickly went through his call logs, messages, and even his GPS history. Everything seemed normal at first glance, but then I noticed a recurring number that didn't match any of his usual contacts. As I dug deeper, I found messages that confirmed my worst fears. They were from someone named Mia, and the tone was unmistakably intimate. My heart sank as I read through them, each message a hammer blow to my trust and our marriage. The realization that he had been lying, not just about his work hours, but about something as profound as fidelity, was overwhelming. I sat back, the phone heavy in my hand, feeling a mix of vindication and devastation. I was right, but the truth did not bring relief, only a profound sorrow. The rest of the day passed in a blur, my thoughts swirling, trying to grapple with the reality of my findings. When Henry came home that night, his usual cheerful greeting felt hollow. "Hey, how was your day?" he asked, oblivious to the storm inside me. I looked at him, the familiar features now marred by the betrayal. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steady, despite the turmoil inside. "It's important." Henry's expression changed, a flicker of concern passing over his face as he nodded. "Of course, what's up?" "Not here," I replied, gesturing for him to follow me to the living room where we could speak without interruptions. As we sat down, I took a deep breath, preparing myself to confront him, to demand the honesty and respect our relationship deserved, no matter how painful the next steps might be. "But order me around, and you have a bad attitude," but it was Mia who was there for me when I needed someone to talk to. Henry's words hit me like a punch to the gut, the shock and disbelief reverberating through me. "Mia? Marry her? Leave me?" The pieces of the puzzle fell into place with a sickening clarity. I looked at him, the man I thought I knew, the man I had built a life with, and felt a surge of betrayal unlike anything I had ever experienced. "What are you saying?" I managed to choke out, my voice trembling with a mix of hurt and anger. Henry's expression remained unchanged, as if he had rehearsed this moment in his mind 1,000 times. "I'm saying that I want to be with Mia." "I'm leaving you," he repeated, his voice devoid of emotion. The world seemed to tilt on its axis as I struggled to comprehend the magnitude of his words. How could he do this? How could he throw away everything we had built together, everything we had shared, for someone else? Mia, the name echoed in my mind, a painful reminder of the betrayal unfolding before me. I felt a surge of heat rise within me, a mix of rage and sorrow threatening to consume me whole. "How could you?" I whispered, the words barely audible over the pounding of my heart. Henry didn't respond, his gaze shifting to the woman beside him, a woman I now recognized as the source of my crumbling marriage. Mia looked back at me, her expression a mixture of defiance and satisfaction, as if she had won some twisted game. In that moment, something inside me snapped. The pain of betrayal gave way to a steely resolve, a determination to rise above the wreckage of my shattered marriage. I may have been blindsided by Henry's betrayal, but I refused to let it define me, to let it break me. With a trembling hand, I reached out to cradle my newborn daughter, the tiny bundle of life that represented hope amidst the chaos. "We'll be okay," I whispered to her, my voice filled with a newfound strength. "We'll find a way through this, together." As Henry's words hung in the air, a cruel echo of his betrayal, I knew that this was just the beginning of a new chapter, one that I would write on my own terms, with my daughter by my side. Whatever lay ahead, I was determined to face it head-on, to reclaim my strength and rebuild my life from the ashes of betrayal. And with my daughter in my arms, I knew that I had all the motivation I needed to keep moving forward, one step at a time. And confronting him, Henry seemed to falter, his confidence wavering in the face of Olivia's directness. Mia, on the other hand, remained composed, her hands still clasped tightly in Henry's. I could see the uncertainty flickering in her eyes, a hint of apprehension beneath the surface. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what needed to be said. Yes, Olivia. I want a divorce, I declared, my voice steady, despite the storm raging within me. And yes, I want to be with Mia. The words hung in the air, a heavy silence settling over the room as Henry and Mia exchanged bewildered glances. It was as if reality had suddenly shifted, the pieces of our fractured marriage falling into place with a painful clarity. Wait, Meline, please, Henry pleaded, his voice tinged with desperation. I didn't mean for it to happen like this. It's just Mia and we. But his words faltered, his gaze dropping to the floor as if unable to meet my eyes. It was then that I realized the depth of his betrayal, the extent of the lies he had woven to conceal his infidelity. And with each passing moment, the anger within me burned brighter, fueled by the injustice of it all. Olivia stepped forward, her expression softening with empathy. Meline, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. But I shook my head, cutting her off before she could finish. It's okay, Olivia. None of this is your fault, I said, my voice firm with resolve. I appreciate you being here, but I think it's best if Henry and I handle this on our own. With a nod of understanding, Olivia handed me the envelope she had been holding, her eyes filled with concern. Take your time, Meline. And remember, you have people who care about you, who want to see you happy. I took the envelope, the weight of it heavy in my hands, and watched as Olivia and Henry made their way to the door, Mia trailing behind them. As they left, a sense of finality settled over me, the beginning of the end of one chapter and the start of another. Alone in the hospital room, with my newborn daughter sleeping peacefully beside me, I knew that the road ahead would be difficult, filled with challenges and uncertainties. But I also knew that I had the strength within me to face whatever came my way, to rebuild my life on my own terms, for myself and for my daughter. With a deep breath, I opened the envelope Olivia had given me, ready to take the first step toward a new beginning, toward a future where I was no longer defined by the actions of others, but by the choices I made for myself. I love. Mia's words hung in the air, her tears adding weight to her plea. But despite her emotional display, I couldn't bring myself to sympathize with her. The evidence of Henry's betrayal was irrefutable, and Mia's attempt to paint herself as an innocent victim rang hollow in my ears. You may not have known Henry was married, but that doesn't excuse your actions, I said, my voice cold with anger. You willingly participated in his deception, knowing full well the pain it would cause. Mia's shoulders slumped, her expression one of defeat as she realized the gravity of her actions. I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice barely audible over the sound of my own heartbeat. But apologies were not enough to undo the damage that had been done, the trust that had been shattered beyond repair. And as I looked at Henry, his facade of innocence crumbling before me, I felt a surge of determination to reclaim my life, to protect my daughter from the chaos he had brought into our world. I want a divorce, I declared, the words heavy with finality. And I want full custody of our daughter. Henry's expression darkened at my words, his eyes flashing with anger and resentment. You can't do that, he protested, his voice tinged with desperation. She's my daughter too. But I shook my head, unyielding in my resolve. You forfeited any right to her the moment you chose to betray us, I said, my voice unwavering. I won't let you hurt her anymore. With a heavy heart, I turned away from Henry and Mia, their presence a painful reminder of the betrayal that had torn our family apart. But as I looked down at my sleeping daughter, her innocent face a beacon of hope amidst the chaos, I knew that I had made the right decision. No matter what challenges lay ahead, I would face them head-on, with the strength and resilience born of a mother's love. And as I held my daughter close, I vowed to protect her from the pain and heartache that had consumed our lives, to build a future where she could thrive, free from the shadow of her father's betrayal. The president's voice was stern, his disappointment palpable as he addressed Henry. It was clear that this was not the first time Henry had found himself embroiled in such a scandal, his reckless behavior tarnishing the company's reputation. I'm sorry, sir, Henry mumbled, his gaze fixed on the floor, unable to meet the president's eyes. "It won't happen again." But the president shook his head, his expression grave. "I'm afraid it's too late for apologies, Henry. Your actions have consequences, not just for you, but for the entire company." As the gravity of the situation sank in, Henry's shoulders slumped, the weight of his mistakes crushing him beneath their burden. And as I watched him, a part of me couldn't help but feel a twinge of pity for the man who had once been my husband, who had now become a cautionary tale of the dangers of deceit and betrayal. But amidst the chaos and turmoil, one thing remained clear: my daughter and I deserved better. And as the president turned to leave, his parting words echoed in my mind, a reminder that despite the challenges ahead, there was still hope for a brighter future. "Take care of yourself, Meline," he said, his tone softened with genuine concern. "And remember, you're not alone. We'll do everything we can to support you." With those words ringing in my ears, I watched as the president and Olivia left the hospital room, leaving Henry and Mia to face the consequences of their actions alone. And as the door closed behind them, I felt a sense of closure wash over me, a new chapter beginning in my life, one filled with possibility and promise. But amidst the uncertainty of what lay ahead, one thing remained certain: I would do whatever it took to ensure a better future for myself and my daughter, to rise above the betrayal and heartache, and to find the happiness and fulfillment we both deserved. After the divorce, I decided to stay with my parents to provide a stable environment for our daughter during her early years. It allowed me some time to recuperate after all the hardships. Henry, my ex-husband, faced consequences for his actions. He was transferred to a remote branch of the company, effectively isolating him from the central operations. It was a reminder of the price he paid for his infidelity and indifference. As for Mia, she felt the repercussions of her actions as well. Cut off by her uncle, the president, she lost her job and support. It was a harsh lesson in the consequences of her behavior, a stark reality check for someone who had previously only thought of herself. For me, returning to my parents' home provided a supportive environment for raising our daughter during her formative years. Henry's transfer and Mia's dismissal served as tangible reminders of the fallout from their choices.